I want to do just a quick formal introduction just to welcome you all. So as we said, my name is Leona, and Precious and I will be engaging with you all in this conversation. And we just wanted to have a conversation just to get these artists who are taking part in Art Hadare to kind of speak about their experiences being from Zimbabwe, leaving the country, and then also operating as artists wherever you are now, and how that dynamic has influenced or maybe not influenced your work. And so, yeah, I think we're both pretty excited for this conversation. Um, so we can kind of jump into it. Maybe you guys can just start off with saying who you are quickly and like what your practice is about.
I'm a visual artist based close to Cape Town. Interests are the exploration of empathy, often through sound, and I have a strong performative element to my work.
Anna?
Yeah. I'm also a visual artist, mainly working with oil paints and drawing, and based in Paris. And my work is very figurative narrative. So there's always an element of narration to it. And I'm working, and my current themes deal in the preoccupation of modern man, I suppose, in mass consumption and capitalism and consumerism. Those would be the things that I'm working on at the moment.
All really big topics.
Now, I say it's in your face. I suppose also living in Paris for a while, I really see the difference. Growing up in Zimbabwe and living now in Paris, it's really in your face. So certain things become, your lived reality changes a little bit. And so certain things stand out a lot more. And I think,
Yeah, I think that's also a really interesting point. Like how do you feel like it's so different? Like what are the sort of the differences that you notice?
Just to jump in there, I think the biggest difference for me, having lived in South Africa for many years, is the connectivity, is the way that people connect. And it's more cerebral here, as opposed to moving from more in an embodied and heart space. That's my personal experience. Yeah.
I would completely agree with what Sonia said as well. You feel that growing up as, I think it must be in other places in Africa, but particularly in Zimbabwe, is what I can speak of is time is different. The perception and conception of time is different. So you feel like you have the time to get to know somebody, their family. And I feel that living in a Western society, or where time is everything is in a rush, you're always busy. So you don't dedicate enough time to really slow down. And I feel like when we slow down, that's when a lot of things can happen. It creates a certain space where you can really understand people. And here, I think that it's missing. So you're always constantly in a rush. But then I sometimes take a step back and say, okay, we're always rushing here in the West, but do we really accomplish more? That's always the dialogue that I'm going through, because I'm not so sure for many. Yeah.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead, Precious.
I was just going to say, this idea of like a sort of slowed down sense of time, or a more sort of considered sense of time, do you think in any way you think about that when you're working, not just sort of in your day-to-day interactions with people, but even in your practice? Does it ever like pop up in your mind of the pace at which you work maybe being influenced by that in any way?
For me, it's not so much time as that I'm always pondering elements of nature and soil. On a daily basis, I long for red soil, and I can never escape that space. It's something that nothing else can fill that space. That's really how I feel. And I collect soil where I go. I'll collect from red soil or oxidized soil, or even anthills, and I collect them and I grind it and I keep it. And sometimes I work with it because that somehow connects me in a very, very in a space where I can't even explain with words. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also kind of that resonates with me, this idea, especially like the red soil thing, because I feel like it's such a like such a strong visual element of when I think of Zim. Like I think it's everything was always just tinted with this kind of red overglaze or red dust everywhere. Um, so yeah, I think that definitely resonates with me. And I guess I wonder, in your work, I know you said you're interested in like the environment and nature and you enjoy being around those elements. If that's also like also you trying to explore that connection, particularly with like this red nature and with the soil.
Yes, oh, definitely. I mean, I did a residency. Actually, that's where I filmed the work for Art Harare, now showing, and in this really desolate space, which reminds me the most of Zim. It's open. There's space. There are a lot of rocks, and just the landscape and the soil. And when I actually went there in 2019, I actually had I just kind of emotionally kind of fragmented. I could emotionally could almost not handle the vastness and what it evoked and unearthed in me. And hence also the work, I think, that was so powerful because I was really connecting to the soil.
Just hearing you talk about Sonia, about and Leona, the soil, the red soil of home. It's just you can almost I almost smell it. I don't know. There's always that smell that you get when every time you get off the airplane, when you're home, when you touch down, and you smell the earth, and there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it in a concrete jungle. Hey, you don't. It's kind of like it gets you in a visceral way, and yes, definitely, it's that connection to nature that's just irreplaceable. And I have a hard time finding it, and I really look for it, and I really have it's difficult to find it in Europe. I mean, in France in particular, in Paris, it's a beautiful city. It's one of the most, architecturally speaking, for me, it's one of the most beautiful cities created, but yet it's missing the natural component. There's woods that you can go to, there are forests, but you always have to go looking for them, whereas back home it's something that you'd open your window and 70% of what you would see is above the horizon line, the skyline is. So it just instills in that what we were talking about before, this kind of inner tranquility, that even though a lot of what can happen outside, inside you're a little bit more tranquil, just because you see that visually and you feed off it, and it puts you it always put me at ease. There's nothing like that's why even the last time I was back home, it's like an immediate sense of ease that you feel, despite what's going on, despite even that sometimes with the shortages, the power cuts, the having water, not having water. And I was still lucky compared to what it was for what the majority of people were going through in Zimbabwe. We're still in Harare. I mean, for many things, we still had access to a lot of things, but it's I don't know, it's definitely those elements, the earth elements that surround you in Africa, that are irreplaceable.
And linking to that we also spoke about earlier, the stillness and the quietness, and something something that I look for, and obviously in my environment where I am now, I can't find it because of the urban setting, is just the sound of falling leaves onto the ground. That is just something that I will always listen out for. A lot of my work when I draw is I'm drawing sound. So I'm particularly focused on what I hear. And the last time I went back to Bulawayo, and I sat outside and I could hear the leaves fall. It was incredible.
It's beautiful what you just said about sort of drawing sound. I think a lot of the people who are taking part in Art Harare, there's this interesting in between of trying to capture these sort of emotions, these feelings, but also the reality of being Zimbabwean, or coming from Zimbabwe, or just sort of the narrative of Zimbabwe. So I think that's an interesting take, to just think of drawing sound. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Leona.
Okay. Go ahead, Sonia.
No, I just sorry, I'm making a lot of links. Linking to that, I mean, the one thing that in the residency that I plan to do in Bulawayo is work with sound within the colonial space, and work with the floorboards, and draw that sound. And I don't know exactly what to do with it, but obviously sound is quite central for me when I link back to Zim. Yeah, it's just something that I've noticed.
Sonia, you work with sound a lot, and trying to understand or capture particular emotions in the space. And I was just maybe wondering if maybe this is more of a comment, but how, like we've spoken in depth about this very physical connection to the land, which is really based in what is emerging to be the very material feelings around like the natural elements. And I'm wondering how, I mean, the way that your sound translates that feeling, does it occupy more of like a mental space for you? And like, is the physical elements of home, like, does that occupy a mental space more for you now that you are not in Zim?
It's an interesting question. I feel that I travel when I draw sound. So I feel that I'm not particularly linked to the reality of where I am. And even in my performance-based work, also now towards the end of this year, I will float the body in white space so that I'm not linked to where I am currently, that I am further, where I am more Pan-African. I am not only in the South.
Yeah.
Not sure that answers your question.
No, it's fine. That was great. That answers my question.
Okay.
I guess we can move on to the next question, which was really trying to just ask, how do you both see Art Harare as a valuable platform? Like, what does it mean for you both to be participating in Art Harare? Ms. Anna, you can start.
I think it's a fantastic platform. And I mean, in today's world, we have so many, right? Like that are opening up. But it's, I think in particular, what's really important is that it's created by artists, number one. So with from part of some of the creators of Art Harare is to putting the thoughts and ideas and the perspective, the artist perspective first, and also connecting us all artists that are all over the world working and yet participating in even though in a virtual space, gallery space, but where we can exchange ideas and that link us all together. So I think it's great. I feel very privileged to be part of it, to be able to get to know also other artists that I wouldn't have gotten to know, seeing as I'm not in the country. I'm not, when you're outside of the country, it's sometimes it's tough to feel relevant. So in a way, platforms like Art Harare, you are able, because you're always, you're always looking from the outside in now, as opposed from inside out. And so now I feel platforms such as Art Harare, they're really able to change that. You feel you're able to feel involved. And I think that that's great.
I feel that I'm connecting to home. And that is an amazing experience, even though I was born and raised up in Bulawayo, but I mean, it's the whole country. And I feel and I feel incredibly privileged. And it's a base. It feels like a platform where I've entered into almost like a portal of sorts, and it feels to me like the beginning of something. It's not just going to be Art Harare and then that's the end. To me, it feels it's like a doorway, and yeah, that's very exciting.
It's like a step to a future dialogue, which is great. And it's fantastic with all the artists and everybody's work is so different. So I'm very excited to see what it will look like as well.
Do you both also know or have colleagues from where you are who are also Zimbabwean artists as well?
Yes and no. Yes and no. But I think, like Anna just said, just this opportunity to get an insider's view of artists now in Zimbabwe and relevant artists, and connecting with them is really important because we need to take hands. We need to connect with one another on the continent. I recently came off a platform called Pan-African Creative Exchange, linked, based in Bloemfontein, and was really incredible to see, and we're still on that WhatsApp group, to feel the connection. We are opening up opportunities for one another. We're supporting one another. We're involved in each other's works, and I'm hoping this will open up in the same way.
So has like the digital space opened up more opportunities for collaboration in much accessible or quicker and easier ways for both of you?
Definitely.
I think Tamari is also here now.
Yes, I've joined successfully.
Well
Nice.
done.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
There you are.
There we go.
There we go. Yay. I'm glad that you're able to connect with us.
Yes, same here after a struggle.
About how difficult network can be in Zim as well. But I'm glad you
Yes.
Yeah.
gone through that. So I guess maybe we can just jump back, and Tamari, if you want to just kind of say who you are, and what your practice is about, and yeah, just a little bit about yourself.
Oh, okay. I'm Tamari. I'm a fine art photographer. I did my Bachelor of Fine Arts at Michaelis School of Fine Art, which is at UCT. So after graduating, I came straight to Zim and I developed my photography practice. Most of my work is about re-representing the colonial archive and looking at how the Black body has been represented in Western art and trying to go against the grain of the stereotypical representation. So usually in my portraits, I show females who have a multifaceted identity, in the sense that they're different cultures. I merge like Western influence with African influence just to create a new visual language. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that sounds really amazing and really interesting work. I mean, I like that we have like sort of three very different practices and mediums presented in the conversation. Like Sonia does performance and drawing, and then Anna does painting, and then you do photography. I guess it's also interesting because so Sonia's in South Africa and Anna is in France, and you are based in Zim. So we were just talking about, you know, the differences or how each person has responded to being outside of the country. So I guess also just wondering, for you being like you were in South Africa, but you made the choice to go back to Zim. Was that a very specific choice as to why you wanted to go back, and how does that influence your work now?
It was mostly in terms of job opportunities. I found myself having a practice that relates more to the Zimbabwean culture. So also being influenced by my dual heritage, I wanted to go off of that and create work that that's closer to home. Yeah.
Like from a more practical point of view, I guess it's the simplest question, but like, how do you find yourself working in Zim? Do you find that like, you know, it's challenging, or do you find that like there's so much more inspiration because you're on the ground and you're there, like on a day-to-day or just sort of generally in your practice?
Well, the fact that most of my work is bought on an international scale, most of my clients, they're not in Zim, they're based in places like America and Europe. So I haven't really had that struggle of getting clients, because I just feel like art is more appreciated abroad compared to here in Zim. But that's why I've also had to adapt, in the sense that I've also got a framing company, which works hand in hand with my photography, and branching into things like interior deco and providing art deco for families and houses is how I'm also making a living.
That's really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. There was something that you just said now that kind of made me think of something we said prior, but like leading back to Art Harare and the value of Art Harare as a platform. Do you think, from the point of view of a Zimbabwean audience, that's something, all three of you can answer this, by the way, that's something that's like a really valuable tool to maybe create more of a sort of appreciation or like a visual love of art in Zim and Zimbabwean artists particularly?
Yes, I think the fact that Art Harare is an interdisciplinary platform allows us to get inspired by each of the artists that we're working with, or it can give rise to potential artistic collaborations. And also the fact that photography, my practice, is something that's not viewed as an art form because it's highly commercialized in Zimbabwe, but people are slowly breaking away from this tradition, and platforms like Art Harare help ignite this process by putting photography at the forefront alongside other mediums as well. Yes.
And how, like, when you show your work in Zim, how do people respond to your work?
They're very interested in the background, the fact that it's vintage, and it reminds them of pictures that we used to get back in the day, like old family photos. So they're very interested in that new aesthetic. And most of them also want commissioned pieces. So they would approach me for a vintage photo shoot, a family vintage photo shoot, and the likes.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you still shoot analog, or do you shoot fully digital? Because I think at some point you were shooting in analog, which made me think of that question about time before.
Oh, yes, that was in Cape Town when I had access to analog cameras, but now it's fully digital because we don't have the analog facilities in Zimbabwe that would, like, for example, a dark room and all those supplies. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting how, like, I mean, like in this particular case, like how the access to certain resources can change certain aspects of your practice. But I'm also just wondering, for Sonia and Anna, if you have, if you have shown your work in Zim, and what has that been like for both of you in terms of the responses from the audience?
So I have shown my work at the Delta Gallery. That's actually my first introduction to arts when I was a little girl, was going to the Delta Gallery and then meeting Helen Leros and Derek Huggins, who run it. And it's still to this day one of the most relevant contemporary art spaces in Harare. And I had the privilege of being taught by Helen. From every Saturday, she would run classes that were open to anyone, any local artist could just walk into the gates of Delta Gallery. And she is a very passionate woman, a woman that basically gave everything to all young Zimbabwean artists. And she just instilled this drive and fire in you to just love art. More importantly than just the technical aspect of it. It had to be from your gut, from your heart. And so I keep in touch with the artists that we have that have gone through the doors of Gallery Delta, and there's quite a lot of contemporary Zimbabwean painters and artists. I feel that's, Art Harare is a great platform, and it's able to, what I'm really happy is that it's able to kind of showcase a lot of artists from, as what was just said about artists, different types and styles and mediums. and medias of art, but also that art, the fact that it's bringing all the artists back together in a way, because I think that's I grew up there in the 90s, so there was contemporary art was, I mean, there was a lot of production going on, and it was well seen. And there were shows at the Delta Gallery or the National Gallery that were highly attended. Now, afterwards, was it leading to sales in that sense? Was it leading to, that is a different conversation, but I think it was, maybe in the small sectors but it was still appreciated. I always, when I left Zimbabwe and I studied in Paris and I studied in New York, I always felt that, well, what we were doing in Zimbabwe was sometimes even more advanced than what I had done in my university days studying, because there was just that freedom of creativity, of being able to, maybe if you, exactly, depending on your circumstances, if you didn't have this to paint, when then you would use this material. You had to be resourceful, and that's something that I think just opens the door for lots more creativity than just when everything is just there put in front of you. So I don't know if I answered your question. I think I answered it with 3 other directions.
Yeah, no, that was good. It was great. Thank you. Sonia, what was your experience like?
Well, I've never shown in Zimbabwe, so it's going to be very interesting because I'm currently looking at whiteness from the post-colonial perspective, and it'll be very interesting, I think, to show work there. And I have no idea what the responses would be. So I'm looking forward to some engagement or some conversations around that. I would really.
And what about in South Africa? What are those conversations like when you show your work?
It's interesting. Non-engagement from white people. People not wanting to go there. Sometimes abusive space. But the content, because it does evoke a lot of emotions for a lot of white people. But because I'm looking at the intergenerational trauma because of apartheid and colonialism, I anticipate those kind of reactions, and I don't think I would have stepped into the space if I thought I wouldn't be able to handle it. But often I feel I'm like a lone ranger, or I'm on my own. But that's okay, because I'm doing what I feel I should be doing.
Yeah, that's really
the beauty of art, eh? Like this ability to be this tool or this conduit for these types of conversations or non-conversations. And, in particular from the context of Zimbabwe and the value of art as a way of expression. Yeah.
The word that you've just used, non-conversations, because I think conversations don't always have to be verbal. And maybe we can't even assess always what's happening, or maybe people just come and look and leave, but maybe, just maybe, there is something that somebody takes home, or there's a discussion at somebody's dinner table, and I think that's the way we change the world.
One of the other questions that we had was really just, you are all women artists, how that perhaps influences or does not influence your work at all, or if there are any discussions around that, being Zimbabwean women artists.
Well, for me personally, I can't say that it does. And just growing up in Zimbabwe and seeing, working with other artists, in the 90s, both male, female, and I think it was difficult. I don't know if it is more of a cultural viewpoint as to what it is to be an artist, whether you're a man or a woman, how that is perceived in the local culture, if it's perceived as something worthwhile, or I think that maybe that should be the question, because I think that it's just art in and of itself as what you do, as something that you're going to do in life, is maybe that's not what's perceived to be something worth investing in. And so I think that a lot of my contemporaries that I grew up with that were painting had a really hard time from their family members as well, who just didn't accept them being artists. I had the good fortune of my parents supporting me, but I know a lot of my friends and colleagues, they didn't have that. So I think that that could be a question to say in the traditional cultures, is it something that we support?
Good point.
Yeah, I would also agree with that one. And yeah, coming back to gender, I also don't experience that really. I work mostly with males somehow. I don't know why, but it's never in my space or in my mind. Although I do think within the art world, I think that the hierarchy is more male dominated. But yeah, I think your question, Anna, about culture, local culture, the value placed on art, and some artists really have to really struggle to get to where they want to be, and it's not valued, or it's not seen as a, you're not, what do you do as an artist? I mean, I still have that in my family. So you're just not really working, you're just having fun. And yeah, the value appropriation to that's an interesting one. I agree.
Yeah, well, with my experience, like where I exhibited at the National Gallery, there was this audience member who was looking at my art, and he was telling everyone else that I think this is a male photographer. I was just blending in the audience because I wanted to see how they received my art, and they were saying this has to be a male photographer because of the eye and the way it was composed. Then I actually approached them and I was like, no, I am the photographer. I'm the one who took this picture. So it's just very interesting to note how your work is perceived by others and whether gender can be seen in the work that you produce.
And in terms of the idea posed by Anna about sort of from a cultural point of view and an appreciation of art in that way, do you think there's like, you know, amongst your peers and your family, for example, that support of you taking that on as a sort of career path? Because I remember when I said I want to be an artist, my mom sort of was very confused, which I think is the case for a lot of people. So I'm wondering what your experience of that is like.
Yes, she was, initially she wasn't very supportive, but she let me go onto this journey trusting that there was going to be some fruition. So in terms of benefits, she's actually now seeing that you can make a living off being an artist. And my sister is actually venturing into the same field. And it's just, I feel like we are the way makers in our family, showing that art is as beneficial as any other career choice.
It's interesting also the dialogue, I think, between, so for a family, they need the assurance that their child is making the right career decision. And yet sometimes just for artists, it comes from the heart. It's not so much about a career, it's because it's something that we need to express. It needs to come out. And I don't know, it's difficult, that battle that's always, you know, yes, is this how you're going to make your livelihood and support yourself and support your family? But then there's also something else, I believe, and that's like you have to get your message across. It's something that's maybe greater than yourself, and that should not be judged in financial terms. And I think that that's what's so difficult with people, especially family members, to understand, is that you know, because their main concern will be, well, how are you going to put food on the table for your future family, for your children? And so it's a dialogue, because it is not a certain. I mean, in today's world, nothing is really certain. But like back in our parents' day, it was, you know, a lot more. You go to school, you get a degree, you follow a certain path, and there were certain outcomes that will happen. But art in and of itself is already, it's a variable. You just don't know. You don't know, because the criteria by which it's judged and who will make sales or not. It just depends. It's so relative from place to place. But I think that that's also an interesting dialogue is that, you know, is it something that just, do you just looked at something, the function of being artist just by its financial gains, or is it something more important than that? Because I think the dialogue that art can bring is even more important than actually the financial outcome of whether what you can sell.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of like what you're describing, and it's sort of like this, like a calling, basically. Like there's no sort of logical reasons that could accurately explain why you would choose to do art. Yeah, and I guess that's where families have a difficult time understanding why you would choose to do art. But it's also really interesting. Like I think maybe your work, Sonia, and also your work, Tamari, who are really looking at these colonial legacies, but how sort of, I mean, art was always part of like, you know, African heritage or like pre-colonial heritage. But then now it's strange that like now it's not considered in the same way, or now you have to justify why you want to pursue art and also justify the financial value of it.
Yeah, when I was in Senegal, I went there twice, and I think what really struck me there was that I felt that people would just talk about art. It would be embedded in the culture. It wasn't something that was to the side, or that was only artists would engage about art. That was the very interesting difference to me. And I kind of imagine that living in that kind of environment where, well, you might, Anna, you might have it there in Paris a bit more, but that it becomes part of daily conversation.
Yeah.
And that those conversations are opened, and that's what I meant about, you know, that it doesn't always have to be a writer, but that it's a fabric. It's part of life.
It's part of a culture. It's part of what feeds a culture. It's part of when you grow up that everyone should have the access to it and be able to benefit from it, because it's true. It just opens up your mind in so many different ways, and a different way of thinking and perceiving the world. And I think that that's perhaps that's something that needs to be, maybe, I don't know if worked on would be the right words to use, but that's I think the goal, to be able to just make art an integral part of just growing up and in every society, and appreciate it for something. Yeah.
Yes, I was just going to say art is necessary also in the sense of making social commentary, because if there's a world issue that's happening, people will not be as responsive to it, and unless it's depicted in an artistic way, like a painting that's making a commentary on politics, people will actually look at that painting and engage with it in a way they wouldn't normally engage with an issue that has nothing to do with art.
It's in a way what Sonia was saying earlier. It gives you that barrier. It can also, it's a sort of barrier, but also the leeway to look at something, to breathe, that you don't need to use words necessarily, but something it can come across. It can come across without just you, for example, a social issue, without you just watching a political debate or watching the news, or where it's very much we're desensitized just from the mass repetition of the way that things are presented on the media. Whereas with art, you have that step back, you have that space to breathe and to think and to digest in your own time. That yes, I think that goes with what you're saying. It's very, I agree with it.
Yes.
Something that I would really, I'm jumping now, but something I would love to do, and I think is really necessary, is I'm working on another project where we're working with music and sound and healing on the continent, and to connect with understandings of indigenous knowledge, indigenous music, indigenous art, as opposed to what always come from the Western side. And that is a crossover and an intersection that I personally really long for. And yeah, I'm just putting it out there. It's something that I feel is really necessary for change again.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking just now of what Tamari said about, you know, you and your sister sort of being the way makers for your family. And I'm just thinking about also, Anna, what you were saying about you in the 90s and Delta and kind of the space that's nurturing an education or sort of making it intrinsically part of yourself, and how maybe now, you know, in this digital sphere that we're living in, if you think about the platform of Art Harare and COVID and how that sort of made us all very digital Zoom savvy human beings sometimes,
Yeah.
how this sort of, you know, the sort of looking forward is helping us maybe appreciate and look back a bit, you know, just thinking of Sonia and the notion of indigeneity and stuff. I'd be curious because I think it's great that the platform is a free platform, so anyone can kind of, you know, attend Art Harare, as it were, and how because it's existing digitally, maybe that is that way making or that next step into having more people engage with art and kind of create that visual language or that literacy for themselves to be able to start to say, okay, well, this is a way to express without words, or this is a way to start to actually think more about what art means in my sort of conversation. And I think that's just an interesting thing to think about, because I think you all mentioned like this idea of connecting or communicating, or, you know, in terms of the artists that are taking part, but also I think for our audiences as well, it'll be a really good way to make those connections with not just you, but with each other, hopefully through your art.
I guess if there's no more comments or questions, thank you to everyone for participating in this conversation. I think we're going to go ahead and edit it out, and then we'll send you all like a final draft or something as in the following week. But yeah, I think we're all really looking forward to Art Harare and just seeing your work as well on that platform, and hopefully seeing your work in person soon.
Yeah.
The next one. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. It was really lovely to meet everybody. And thanks for making the time to chat and stuff. It's been really great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting it together
Thank
as well.
you.
And lovely to meet all you ladies.
Yeah.
Lovely to meet you
Meet you all
guys.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely.